My name is Colonel Anne Naclerio. I've been active duty in the U.S. Army for 27 years. I started out at the Uniformed Services University, and my background is actually pediatrics and pediatric critical care medicine. My experience with this book really began when I was at the Office of the Army Surgeon General doing as the Chief of Medical Readiness. And during that time, a lot of women's readiness issues arose, and then became involved with a women's health assessment team that went to Afghanistan in 2011, which led to the Women's Health Task Force. So when I was approached to do the book, it was very exciting to have the opportunity to kind of bring together all that experience, not only my own personal experience, but the experience gained in the past 5 years. Right now, women make up about 15% when you look across all services, but we expect that number to rise as the Pentagon lifts the ban on certain combat designated operational specialties. We feel, or what I have seen in my experience and in working on this book, that women are already serving in combat positions inside, what we would used to call inside the wire. Those lines have become very blurred, and many women are serving with the special forces, with local populace in combat areas, on female engagement teams, women on transport teams, which are technically considered combat support, are still coming under ambush when they're traveling in unsecured territory. And even medical folks are not immune to indirect fire, mortar fire. I was wounded inside the wire, and the gentleman next to me, the soldier next to me, was killed. So medical personnel also are seeing horrific trauma in both soldiers and sometimes the local civilian population, to include children, which is very traumatic. So I think it's our obligation to get the data and to compile the data and to share the data so that our leaders can make the best decisions and provisions to ensure the success of all our soldiers. Since 15% are women, and it may be more in the future, we have to understand so that we can be ready and meet the needs of all our soldiers to ensure their success. What we found in the book is really, across the book, all areas need more study. And on the big picture, women are often not included in studies. So one thing we need is to ensure that service women are included on research, whether it be on PTSD, MTBI, that in the past sometimes they've focused on brigade combat teams, which characteristically have not included women, and therefore women are left out of the data. And that's important so that we can see the differences. It's not that one may get it and one may not, but how we experience post-traumatic stress disorder and functions of how we treat it may be different. Speaking more specifically on the medical issues from my chapter, I think we still have a ways to go on just the basic, how effective our prevention measures are. There's really a lack of data on that, and prevention of urinary tract infections and vaginal infections in women, because it's really a fairly simple problem that's really not well studied. Health education is key. Of the main problems we saw with urinary tract infection, menstrual irregulation, or menstrual irregularities, and unwanted pregnancy, all can be prevented with good education and counseling. We need to educate our service members, and our providers have an obligation to do that. What I also heard from providers is that not all of them are comfortable doing that. So as providers of military women, providers have an obligation to learn the information and get comfortable with the counseling. And the next level would be our military health system, our medical folks, educating our leaders. Because in the units, the leaders also need to understand and be aware of the nuances of their female soldiers that they lead. I focused on my chapter a lot on personal hygiene and menstruation, and that's because those are everyday issues. Those are issues that may sound simple, but are faced every day by women in theater. Where to urinate, how to maintain their personal hygiene during menses. And there are easy ways to there are easy solutions, but unfortunately they're not always articulated to our young service women so that they are aware of them. And they may not cause life-threatening complications, however, they do cause, and this is somewhat well studied, distracting conditions that affect their ability to focus on the mission and be effective at their mission. What we heard from women in theater were some young recruits really perhaps haven't come from intact households and may lack, and do lack, education on simple cleanliness issues, wiping front to back, wearing, cotton panties in hot, humid environments. There's misconceptions about, perfumed products and douching that we know actually are counter, beneficial. The perfumes and chemicals can cause irritation. And so something as simple as training recruits and young soldiers from when they come in on basic hygiene. We do it for foot hygiene, but we need to do it for all hygiene. Then a little more complicated would be, or not complicated, but a next level might be just urinating in compromised positions. Could be in the back of an aircraft where you don't have privacy. Could be that you're in an armored personnel carrier in hostile territory and getting out would compromise your safety. And you're one of 6 and you're the only female. And so using what we call a FUD for short, or a female urinary diversion device. These have been on the markets forever in camping stores, yet most all of the women, the vast majority of the women I've talked to, both on the assessment team and since, haven't heard of them, aren't aware that they're actually in our U.S. military supply system for the using. So that is something they have to know about ahead of time and kind of practice with to be good at it and be comfortable using it. Other things are just managing menstruation and the side effects that go along with menstruation. There are many things on the market, such as hormonal regulation, that can decrease or eliminate the need to menstruate while you're in these austere environments that are perfectly safe and have been, shown safe and effective, but they're not counseled on them, so they're not aware that those options exist. I can't overemphasize this enough. I think hormonal contraception, often because we hear contraception, people are like, oh, well, I'm not going to be having sex, I don't need contraception. But hormonal contraceptive methods offer far more than just protection against pregnancy. And most women aren't educated in that. I will admit, as a healthcare provider myself, I deployed downrange, no one mentioned it to me, and I didn't think about it. I didn't think of it as an option. So these young women don't know it's an option. And without our primary care providers and our providers that are seeing these women, even just for routine health visits, annual health visits, counseling on them, they don't know to ask. Unfortunately, they're not very effective unless they're started ideally at least 6 months, 3 to 6 months prior to a deployment until you want the effective benefit. And so if they're offered at the last minute, they're also not going to be as effective or more cumbersome. So they not only provide, as I mentioned, against pregnancy, they also can either regulate, so you can choose when to have menses, or suppress completely menses, and then therefore the needs of products to manage that, disposal of those products. Also, often you can take advantage of various methods of positive side effect profile, such as decreased, whether it be acne, breast tenderness, mood swings that some women experience, or dysmenorrhea, so painful menses. When we look at why women are seen in our health clinics in deployed environment, the most common reasons are the same as men, musculoskeletal, respiratory stuff. But when you get down to the next step, a little bit further down, it's these kind of issues. So menstrual irregularities as a big category are very common, and many of them can be prevented and managed with hormonal therapies. If offered, just as hormonal contraception, do you need contraception? They immediately think, well, no, I'm not in a relationship, I'm not going to be having sexual relations. What we know from experience is that majority of these women are young, and men and women in their peak of their sexual and childbearing age, and so things do happen downrange, even though unplanned for, meaning consensual sex, and we want them to be prepared for that. But also, unfortunately, there could be unconsensual sex or risk of captivity, captivity, unfortunately, for women could involve rape. And so these are other things that, if counseled for, women may need to know. Just as in our civilian counterparts, unintended pregnancies are alarmingly high. Definitely over 50% in the general population. And we know both from civilian and military that in the young age groups, it's significantly higher. In our demographics in the military, over 40% of our soldiers are under 26. We also know that unintended pregnancies are more common in our less educated and younger women, and our officer ranks tend to be the older women, the 34 average age, whereas our enlisted women average age is closer to 26, 27. So the vast majority of our women serving are in the younger, less educated population. So some studies have reported as high as twice the rate in that subsegment. In 2011, our Deputy Surgeon General, Major General at the time, Horoho, went downrange to do a health service assessment for the combined, the joint operations in Afghanistan. And in that study, one of the lines of effort was women's health. I had the honor of leading that group to look into those issues, and that report outlined over 26 areas of identified issues and recommendations. The Women's Health Task Force was stood up upon return as one of the first actions of now the new Surgeon General to really follow through on those findings and initiate policy change or get those into the hands of the right people to continue through. Because unfortunately, a lot of the things found in the 2011 assessment team were things that were also found by people in 2001 and in previous wars. The task force just made its final report of everything done and the long-standing solutions. So the task force is now concluded. I guess the one thing I want to emphasize is the importance of the book is nuances of what's different based on gender. It doesn't make a gender, there was nothing we found that made women incapable of serving, but there are nuances and differences, and we have to be informed of those. A lot of the issues in Chapter 4 on hygiene, etc., are really no different, I see, than trench foot was in earlier wars. We didn't say, oh, well, we can't have people with feet. We said, we need to provision them with clean socks, dry socks, better boots. Same thing needs to happen. We need to identify the problem so we can provision all of our soldiers correctly so that they can be successful.